If you buy and sell sports cards long enough, you're going to start to pick up little things that can make a huge difference in how much money you make. The problem is most of those lessons come from spending tons of time in the market, and frankly, that takes forever. So in this video, I'm going to save you 20 years and share with you 43 things I've picked up over the past 2 decades investing in cards that every sports card investor should know. Let's get started. Number 1. Get yourself a roll of painter's tape and use painter's tape instead of scotch tape anytime you're packaging up cards or taping a top loader shut. It gets the job done, but it's not going to leave that terrible sticky residue, and it's a lot easier to actually get open for your buyer. Number 2. If you ever sell a card for $750 or more, you need to get signature confirmation when you go to ship the card in order to qualify for eBay and PayPal seller protection. Number 3, time your auctions. So when you list a card for sale at auction, add 7 days, and that's the end time of that auction. So you got to think ahead and think, okay, if I'm listing a card at 4 in the morning, there's probably not going to be anyone on earth awake when my card actually ends a week from now, and I'm probably going to cost myself some money. I'm a big fan of Sunday evenings. It's a good time when you're going to capture a lot of attention from all the time zones if you end something around, say, 9 Eastern time. Number 4, you can get free shipping supplies by simply creating a free USPS account and then going onto their website and then ordering supplies. Many of them are free and they will deliver them directly to your doorstep. One of my favorites to order are the flat rate padded bubble mailers, which I only use as intended, of course, and never would use them as free packaging material. But this is an easy way to save yourself a trip to the post office and get the supplies you need. Number 5, print shipping labels from home. You're going to save money, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself an enormous amount of time because you don't have to wait in line. All you do is print out a label, stick it to your bubble mailer, and then you can put it in your outgoing mail or even drop it in one of the blue drop boxes anywhere. If I sell through eBay, I'm printing a label through eBay. It's the simplest way to do it. But if I'm selling off of eBay, pirateship.com is one that I really like for this purpose. Number 6, Snipe auctions. So there are services out there that you can use to schedule automated bids. This saves you time, it saves you money, and it helps you stay disciplined so you don't get caught in a bidding war at the last second. My favorite one is Gixxen.com. It's great because it's only a few dollars per year and they don't charge you by the bid. There are a lot of valuable tips on the list that we're going to cover today, but this is one that will truly change your life if you're super active in the card market. Number 7, know how to do advanced searches. All you have to do is add a minus sign and then any word that you want to eliminate from a search, and it'll remove any listing that has that particular word in the title. Another one you can do is use parentheses to do an either or search. So if you want to look up Prism PSA 10s of Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix and Caleb Williams, you don't have to have 3 separate searches. You can actually combine them into one by putting those 3 names inside parentheses and separating them with commas. And what this will do is pull up all listings in your search results that have any one of those names in the actual title. This helps you get cleaner results so you don't have to sift through as much junk to get to what you actually want. Number 8, speaking of searches on eBay, you need to know how to save searches on eBay. Once again, this is a big time saver. So all you do here is search for something that you want to save, and then you tap the little heart icon, and then that'll start to show up in your saved searches instead of having to type that same exact search over and over and over again. Number 9, how to get a quality picture for your listings. Using better quality images will help your listings stand out and attract more buyers. So this is a big deal. The camera that's on your cell phone is like good enough quality to shoot a movie. So I want to say that you can probably get a pretty good picture of a baseball card with that same camera. And then just use the basic photo editing software on your phone to crop the picture and to adjust the brightness and contrast so that the color actually pops. You don't need any special training for this. Just do it until it looks good. It'll probably take you 10, 15, 20 seconds total. But this makes such a big difference because your images will actually stand out. Another trick here if you're dealing in PSA graded cards is that you can go directly to PSA's website, look up that specific card's serial number, and then pull the scan that PSA has taken. They use a high quality scanner and you can borrow that photo for your listing. If there are 2 cards side by side and all else is equal, but one has a crummy, uncropped, dull image and yours has this bright, shiny, wonderful image that's crystal clear, which listing do you think is going to attract more buyers? Number 10, take better scans. So if you are a person that does use a scanner for your card images and you want a simple way to make your cards stand out, try scanning with the lid open. It'll scan with a dark background instead of a white background, and it'll really make your cards pop. Number 11, figure out which players are already in demand. So I'll tell you one thing that I've learned the hard way is that it's way easier to deal in players that people already want compared to dealing in that secondary or that third tier of players that people are just like, yeah, that's a guy, but I'm looking for these guys over here, the ones that are actually good. So you can make your life a lot easier by just dealing in cards that people are already looking for, that are super liquid and easy to sell. But how do we figure out which ones are the right players that are already selling? The first one is to look up sale volume by player in your favorite comp tool, like Card Ladder has player index data, for example, or Market Movers has data like this, where you can look up which players' cards are selling the most and for the most. Another way to gauge popularity is to use Google Trends. So it's trends.google.com, and you can actually see what's the search volume for each player. Generally speaking, the higher the search volume, the more popular that player is going to be, or the more relevant, at least in the short term. And lastly is one of my favorites. You can look up the top jersey sales by player, because that's going to tell you which players people are so excited about that they're willing to shell out their hard-earned money to go and rep that player's jersey. That is a true test of player popularity right there. Number 12, take high value packages to the post office counter and have them give you a receipt. The reason for this is when we're packaging cards up at home and dropping them in drop boxes, usually USPS does a great job of scanning the cards in, but every now and then they miss one. And when you have a high dollar package, the last thing you want is your buyer sending you a message saying, hey, when are you going to ship this? When you shipped it last week, but it never got scanned in. So if you take this to the counter and ask for a receipt, it forces the worker to scan the card in, and that shows that you have indeed handed the package off and it is now in USPS's possession. So if there's ever an issue, you can at least point to your buyer, hey, I definitely shipped it, they have it. And then you can take whatever action is necessary from there. Number 13, identify on-card autographs versus sticker autographs. Naturally, this depends a little bit on the set, but on-card autographs tend to be quite a bit more popular than sticker autographs. Know the difference. Number 14, understand the POP report and how to use it. So the POP report is public census data made available by grading companies so that you can see the grade distribution for each specific card. In other words, it shows you the total number of cards graded, and then of those cards graded, how many of them got a 10, how many got a 9, how many got an 8. Now the POP report will change over time as more cards are graded, but it can be used for a couple different things. So first of all, it'll help us understand how difficult or how easy it was to grade a specific card. And secondly, it helps us understand the rarity of each of those grades. Because the grade a card has is another form of rarity, and the POP report helps us understand what that actually means. Number 15, know what eBay authenticity guarantee is and how to use it to your advantage. So anytime you sell an item for above $250, it will go to eBay authenticity guarantee instead of going directly to the buyer. Now, eBay authenticity guarantee serves as a middleman service to make sure the card is indeed authentic and also that it's as described in your listing. This serves as a form of both buyer and seller protection to make sure that the transaction goes the way that both parties thought it would. Now, as a seller, it's very important that you understand this. So when a card goes to eBay authenticity guarantee and once they finalize the authentication process, you are off the hook and that money belongs to you. Even if the buyer wants to return it, even if the buyer says it's not as described, that's on eBay to figure out at that point. It's not on you, as long as you turn off returns. So make sure that for items of $250 and above, you want returns to be off. And that way, after the authentication process, your money is indeed yours. You don't have to deal with buyer remorse or any issues of any kind. And here's a really nasty trick you can use. So if you have a card that's close to $250 of value, but not quite, instead of listing that as a pure buy it now for say $225, if you price the buy it now price above $250 and then field offers, that's going to qualify your item for eBay authenticity guarantee. You should see it on the listing when your listing goes live. And that way, even if the card sells for the same $225, you still get to send it to eBay authenticity guarantee. Again, make sure your returns are off so that the money is yours once it goes through their process. Number 16, understand buy it now versus auction and and when to use each format. So there's a time and place for both of these, but you have to understand the trade-off here. So a buy it now listing gives you control over the price, because if you don't get an offer that you like, then you don't have to sell it, but you give up control over the timeline for when that card will sell. On the other hand, auctions give you control over the timing because you get to put up the backstop. So 7 days after your auction begins, it's going to end and you're going to get paid within a day or two after that. But you surrender control over the price that the item will ultimately sell for, and you need 2 bidders to bid up the price, not just one. There's a time and place for both of these formats, but just know the trade-off is usually between time or money, and you have to decide which one is more valuable to you. Number 17, know how to remove scratches from slabs. So one of the worst things that you can have happen is you buy a card, it shows up in the mail, and the slab is all scuffed up and scratched. That sucks. And what most people end up doing in that scenario is sending that card back to the grading company and spending a bunch of time, a bunch of money to get that card re-slabbed in a fresh case. The good news is you don't have to do that. So I like this product called Novus 2 Fine Scratch Remover, and all you do is put a little dab of this on the front of the slab and then use a microfiber cloth to polish it out, and that'll remove a whole bunch of the light scratches and scuffs from the case. And in about 30 seconds of polishing that, you will have a slab that looks much closer to brand new, and it'll save you a ton of time and money by letting you skip the reslab process. Number 18, how to look up comps to estimate value. So data is powerful, and we need to know what cards have sold for recently to understand the current market for a particular card. So I like Card Ladder, or you can use Market Movers, or if you want a free tool, 130point.com is great. And what I'm looking for here is what are the recent sales that are actually relevant, and using that to ballpark the value of our cards or cards we're considering buying. Number 19, along similar lines, pricing cards when there are no comps. So it's easy when there are a bunch of sales, but what if the last sale was a year and a half ago? Or what if it's a brand new product and there are no comps? So we can look at similar cards of the same player, we can look at similar cards of similar players, we can look at similar cards from last year's product. And it's not always going to be perfect, but it'll at least give us something to work with so that we can sort of triangulate to figure out an estimate of how much the card that we're looking at is worth. Number 20, understanding market seasonality. There are some patterns that repeat themselves every single year for every single sport. And it's this concept that on the way out of the season, values tend to drop. On the way into the following season, values tend to pick up. So if you understand what I'm saying, you can usually buy at one point in the year and sell at another point in the year and have some pretty repeatable success with that, as long as you're targeting the right cards or the right players, because it's not always going to be everyone. But once you understand the patterns, it gives you a repeatable strategy to use year after year after year. And frankly, it's a lot of fun when you understand the market so well that you can make money by speculating on the speculators rather than speculating on the players themselves. Number 21, how to grade cards. Now, if you've never done this before, I can tell you it's only scary until you do it, and then you're either going to win or you're going to learn, and either way you move forward. But the way this works is you send a card off to a professional grading company, you pay a fee, they evaluate condition, and then you get the card back encased in a slab with a grade on top. And some grades can add significant value to your cards. Now, you can go directly through a grading company if you'd like to, but if you're brand new to this, I've found it easier to just go through a trusted third-party group submitter where they'll do a lot of the hard stuff for you, and you just send your cards to them, and then they send them to the grading company and then return them to you on the backside. Grading is a learnable skill. It's one of the most valuable skills you can have in the card market. Highly recommend learning how to do this. Number 22, estimate condition. So the 4 categories of condition are centering, corners, edges, and surface, and you have to be able to understand what you're looking for if you're going to start grading cards. And even if you're not heavy into grading, condition still matters, so it's worth understanding this. But for grading purposes, you can look at PSA's website because they have their standards for what a PSA 10 looks like listed in detail on their site. A little trick for you, if you're not sure about the condition of your card, you can just look up already graded copies of that same card on the internet and then compare your copy to the graded copies to see, does this actually look the same? Or is my copy notably different than the one that got the PSA 10? That's probably a good clue that my card is not going to grade the same way. Number 23, evaluating centering. Now, until you understand what you're looking for, this is really difficult. And then once you understand what you're looking for, it's not difficult at all. So centering refers to the picture on the card and how centered it is on the actual cardstock. So for example, if we're looking at this Bryce Harper rookie card, you can see that there's this border that goes all the way around the card. And this type of card with a border helps us because it makes it pretty clear to see the centering. So what we're looking for is we want this white border to be about the same thickness as this white border. and the same on the bottom and the top here. So you can see this card is fairly well centered. It might be just a hair off center top to bottom, but overall this is close enough that I'm going to send it in for grading. On cards without borders where it's not as clear what we're looking for, you can find landmarks on the card like the Topps logo, for example, and look at the Topps logo to the top of the card, the Topps logo to the right of the card. Or you can use the player's name and look at the name to the bottom of the card. And there's certain things you can look for where it makes it a little clearer what the centering actually is, even if there aren't borders. Number 14, how to decide which cards to grade. So there are only two things that really matter here. It's the value and it's the condition of the card. So the first thing we're looking at is value. We want to make sure that if we're going to pay the grading fee and spend the time, we want there to be some actual monetary upside. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, well, how much is enough? I had the same question years ago, so I came up with something that I call the 2x rule, where I'm looking for cards where the PSA 10 is worth at least double or 2x the total cost of the card. So that's the raw price plus the grading fee. And what this does is it makes sure that we have enough margin built in even after the grading fees, even after the selling fees on the back end. Now the 2x rule matters more on the lower end of the market than the higher end, because on the higher end of the market, you might only have a 1.5x, but if it's a $2,000 card and it's turning into a $3,000 card as a PSA 10, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty darn happy if I make $1,000 on a sports card. But on the lower end, it'll help protect you from situations where you send cards and end up losing money because there's not enough margin built into the PSA 10s. And then the second half of deciding which cards to submit comes down to condition. So we simply need to make sure that the card is in clean enough condition to have a chance at getting the grade that's going to add the value that we need to see. So if you can check the boxes for both value and condition, you're typically in pretty good shape to send that card. Number 25, what's a gem rate and how do we use it to make grading easier? So the gem rate is the number of cards that have gotten a PSA 10 divided by the total number of cards graded. So it's kind of like the success rate for that specific card. Now a higher gem rate suggests that it's a little bit of an easier card to grade. A lower gem rate means it's harder to grade. So we can use this data to help us know which sets were more cleanly manufactured that are going to be easier to find clean copies to get graded. Now the gem rate does have limitations because it's only a leading indicator. At the end of the day, if your card is bent in half, it doesn't matter if the gem rate's 100%, you're not going to get a PSA 10 on that card, but it can at least help us eliminate some of the tough sets to grade and focus on the ones that are going to give us a better chance at success. Gemrate.com is a really strong site that has tons of grading data, including the ability to search by set. But I spent so much time digging into gem rates and cross-referencing with prices and trying to figure out which are the best cards to target that I ultimately decided, let me see if I can build a tool that automates this process. And so I've done exactly that. This is called Coin, the Card Opportunity and Investing Navigator. We call it Coin for short. But this shows you all the key data points on one table so you don't have to bounce back and forth between different sites. And it's going to rank the cards based on overall grading upside. This updates multiple times daily, so you're always dealing with fresh data. We've got sports specific lists. You can look at Pokemon if that's your thing. But ultimately, the point of this tool is to help make grading easier so that you can do 5 hours of grading research in 5 seconds, and then you're onto eBay to look for clean copies of that card to get graded. Now, I'll be upfront, this is a paid tool, so if you don't actually grade all that often, I probably would just skip it. But if you're someone that does grade all the time and you think something like this could help speed up your process, I'll leave a link in the description where you can grab a free 7-day trial and see what you think. All right, number 26, how to find quick flip opportunities. So quick flips are unique because it's the only strategy in the card market where we're actually creating the profit margin when we make the purchase. And the whole point of this is to buy at such a steep discount that we know that we can flip the card for a profit right away. Now, the point of this isn't to go out and beg for a big discount. That's not it at all. It's to go out and find listings that have mistakes in them, or go off of eBay where there's not as much traffic, buy a card for less than it would sell for on eBay, put it onto eBay and make a profit. Some of my favorite ways to find quick flip opportunities are to look for misspelled names in the titles, bad pictures, bad end times, where something's ending at 8:30 a.m. on a Monday morning. Just makes no sense and no one's paying attention at that time. So of course the card's likely to go a little bit lower than it normally would. I like to target 35% or more of a discount. Now this is going to change. On the lower end, I want a bigger discount than that to make it worth my while. On the upper end of the market, a smaller discount might still represent a very large profit margin, but 35% is generally what I'm looking for to make sure there's enough meat on the bone, even after all fees. Now, I will warn you, it takes work to find these deals, but this is literally how I got off the ground in the market 20 years ago when I didn't have very much money to work with, and I was able to make quick flips to build up some bankroll, and then I kind of graduated into more efficient strategies from there. And I even stumble onto quick flip opportunities these days. It's just a more time-consuming strategy, so I don't actively look for them as often personally. But the deals are absolutely out there. You just have to put in the work to find them. Number 27, how to pick a card that's going to set you up for success. So there are all kinds of cards in this market, and some are going to matter more than others. So a couple frameworks to consider. I like cards that are easy to identify when you look at them instantly. For example, if I have to go to the checklist to look up, is this the wave version or is this the ray wave version? That sucks, and I'm probably just going to skip it and move on to a card that's easy to identify right away. I also like to skip cards that are hard to spell. For example, I can never spell the word fuchsia, so if I'm looking at a fuchsia refractor, F-U-S-C or F-U-C, there's an H somewhere in there, I just don't know how to spell it. And I assume that if I don't know how to spell it, I might not be the only one. Maybe I am, I guess. Maybe I'm the worst speller on earth. I don't know. But I want to say that if it's a hard word to spell, other people might have a hard time spelling it. And if they have a hard time spelling it, they're going to have a hard time finding your listing when you go to sell. So you have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes on the back end when you're thinking about which cards am I buying? How easy or hard is it going to be for your buyer to actually find your card? And the other one is just looking at how long the card has actually been around. So I like the cards that have a longer market history. So we have some data that supports that this is the type of parallel or card that has held value or climbed in value over time. Number 28, a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. Now it is 2026, so here's what that means for those of you that don't speak leprechaun. Taking a sure profit today is often better than hoping for a future profit that may never come. Guys, predicting the future is hard, and I've learned this the hard way many more times than I care to admit over the years, but I can't tell you the number of times that I've bought a card, I had a profit available, I got greedy and said, nah, I'm going to hold out and get a little bit more, and then something happens and the value falls way off and I end up taking an L on something that I should have absolutely won on. And so the longer I've been in this market, the more I just want to take the profit and keep turning over inventory. There's always another card to buy, and I'm happy to hit singles and doubles and do it all year long, maybe the occasional home run, instead of always swinging for the fences and striking out a bunch along the way. Number 29, ignore FOMO. So FOMO, or the fear of missing out, is all based on emotion and not wanting to miss out on a potential rise. But all too often, if we can read about something in the news and that's the thing that makes us want to go buy a card, it's already too late. The opportunity is gone. And that's really the time to be selling, not the time to be buying. Number 30, know when you're beat and when it's time to move on. One of the things I see holding people back more than anything else in this market is the refusal to take a loss of any kind, no matter how beat they are on a particular card. Nobody cares what you paid. The only thing that matters is where that card's value is going moving forward. And so often I see people that are just stuck on a price, or they're stuck holding a card because they just can't fathom the idea of taking even a small loss. But the thing is, you're sitting on a sinking ship, and holding on to a card that's falling in value is actually going to end up costing you twice. Once on the card itself when you take the loss inevitably on that card, but then the second time in opportunity, because you could be using that same money to go pursue a much better opportunity. Nobody wins 100% of the time in the card market. Not even the best investors win 100% of the time. But I'll tell you what the best investors absolutely do is they move on from a card when it becomes clear that they aren't going to get the outcome they initially wanted. So know when you're beat, know when it's time to move on to the next one. Number 31. Know how to walk away from a deal. Guys, there are bad opportunities out there. There are average opportunities. There are good opportunities. There are great opportunities. Don't waste your budget on bad or average opportunities. Wait for those good opportunities, and especially wait for those great opportunities. It'll make your life quite a bit easier if you actually have some money left to spend when one of those great opportunities presents itself. Number 32, you must know that time has value. So you have to know what your time is worth and look at where you're spending your time. And what I'd recommend is don't waste your time on trivial tasks that pay you poorly. It's fun to go through that dollar bin and see if you can scoop up a couple of cards that are worth $8 or $10 and get a quick win, but is that really the hourly rate that you want? Or could you be spending your time on something more profitable, like finding clean copies of raw cards that are going to make you hundreds of dollars if they get the grade you're looking for? The same can be said about listing low dollar cards. Now, 2 decades ago, I started at the bottom of the market and I was absolutely spending time listing low dollar cards because that's just where I was. But these days, my time is far more valuable to me and I deal in a lot more mid-range and high-end cards. So it no longer is a good use of my time to be listing $3 cards for sale. Now, I definitely want the value out of those cards still, because if I sell enough $3 cards, then I can buy a bigger card with that money. But that's the type of work that I outsource so that I can spend my time on higher ROI activities. Number 33, know how to stay level. So the good times rarely last forever. The bad times rarely last forever. Sometimes you just have to be able to zoom way out and see the big picture. So if you're feeling like this card can never go down in value, I promise you it can, and it probably will at some point. And on the flip side, if the market takes a turn for the worse, we got to know that that's also not permanent. So there's going to be ebbs and flows in the market, and we've just got to stay level and make sure that we're making the best objective decision we can with the data that we have available. Number 34, keep records. Now this sounds obvious, but you got to know your numbers. And the good news is you don't have to spend a bunch of money on fancy software. You certainly can if you want, but a simple Google Sheet will do the trick for most people. Now, of course, you're going to want to track the obvious categories like price paid, price sold, your fees, your shipping costs, your grading fees, your net profit. But beyond those, a couple of categories that I found to be really helpful are to track estimated current value, where I will manually update that about once a month or so, just to keep a running tab on how cards are moving over time. Once you've sold something, it's obvious, but when you haven't sold your inventory yet, if you're only working off of what you paid, that's not always an accurate picture of what your inventory is worth, since values change. So the estimated current value gives you a better comprehensive look at where you actually sit today. Another one is what I call profit velocity, but I'm looking at the number of months that I've held the card, and then when I'm making a sale, I divide net profit by number of months it took to make that profit. And effectively, it shows you how much profit per month did you make, which gives you the ability to compare the efficiency of your investments against each other, even if they're in completely different price ranges. Number 35, know how to manage your card budget. So there are 2 ways to do this. As you start making profits, you can either put money back in or you can take money out. And there's nothing wrong with either approach, but you got to know what you're actually giving up by doing one or the other. So if you're reinvesting profits, that's generally going to unlock faster growth, because your profits can compound if you find a winning strategy and continue to do it with more and more resources. But if you're reinvesting all of your profit, then you don't get paid yet. On the flip side, if you start making profits and you take them out of the business immediately, then you're going to get paid at least, but you're not going to grow quite as fast. What I've found is there's oftentimes a nice balance somewhere in the middle where you get to pay yourself with about half the profits and reinvest the other half to keep things moving forward. But the beauty of this is you get to decide how you want to run your own business. Number 36, how to separate hobby from business. So cards are awesome, right? They're a lot of fun, and it's what draws a lot of us to the market, because it's way more fun dealing in sports cards than stocks or something like that. But what you want if you're someone who collects cards is clear separation between your PC and your business inventory. So my rule of thumb is my business inventory can never become part of my personal collection. But cards from my personal collection, if they rise high enough in value or if I get sick of them, can absolutely become part of my business inventory. And the way I look at this is most of the cards that I put in my PC, they're worth more to me than they are to the market anyway. It's when the card starts to become worth more to the market than it is to me that I start looking at selling that card and moving on to a different one. One other little tip here, get a separate bank account for your cards if you don't have one. You don't have to set up a business necessarily, but you can just get a separate account so that you don't accidentally spend your grocery money on a Shohei Ohtani card. Number 37, how to ship safely. So let's say we sold a card. For this example, we're going to use this Pete Weber. Who do you think you are? I am. It's one of the best cards ever made. Now, of course, I'm not out of my mind, so I would never actually sell this card. But let's say we did. How do we actually protect it? So what I'm looking for is a sheet of bubble wrap, simple, a bubble mailer. What I like to do is take the bubble wrap, cut it in half. And just like that, we've got 2 pieces of bubble wrap. This is a strategy that I've used literally thousands of times for Slabs, and it has never once failed me. Knock on wood that this won't be the one time or whatever. But so we take the card and we take it and roll it in the bubbles one direction. If you'd like, you can put a little piece of tape. Scotch tape doesn't matter for this purpose. I know I said to use painter's tape earlier, but for bubble wrap, it literally doesn't matter. And for the other piece, we're gonna roll it just like we did, but the other direction. And now this is wrapped in like 2 different layers of bubbles on all sides. The bubble wrap comes past the edge of the card, so it's protected on all sides. One more piece of tape just to hold this down. And we've got this little bubble brick thing. Now we take our bubble mailer, more layers of bubbles, put this in here like so, seal it shut. And then I like to put one piece of packaging tape right on the seam here just for good measure. Put your label on the front of this, of course. And just like that, you've got yourself a safely packaged card. Now, if you're ever wondering if you packaged something well enough, what I like to imagine is if I was just holding this card walking around and I just happened to drop it, would I be confident that the card is going to be safe? And if so, I'm probably good. If not, might want to add some more bubbles. Now, if the value is higher, I like to use the small flat rate boxes from USPS, or if you need to ship more than one card, you can put them into a box and then put the box into one of those flat rate padded bubble mailers I showed you earlier in this video. All right, number 38, communicate and negotiate like an adult. If you're dealing in cards, you are running a business. Please treat it like such and be professional. So if you're reaching out to someone on eBay with a message like, "What's your lowest?" you are basically telling the seller that you don't respect their time, because that's not how you start a conversation. If you want to actually make an offer, make an offer. Don't ask the seller to negotiate against themselves. Why would anyone do that? If I ever get that message, at this point I just ignore it because I just don't have time to respond to that. But if someone makes me a legitimate offer, even if it's through the message system, of course I'm going to respond back. So this one's simple, but just act like a grown-up. There's a whole other list we could add to this one too, like shipping things on time and being honest about the condition if there's a flaw with your card. Just use common sense and be professional. It will serve you well. Number 39, and this is a big one, so how to get support from your significant other. So if your wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, whatever, doesn't like sports cards, here's what I want you to do. Go make some money with a card. Then I want you to use that money to pay for something that would normally come out of your family checking account, and then let them know where the money came from. Now, they may not want to become your business partner or anything like that, but I bet that once they realize that this is something that you're doing not just for yourself, but it's also something that's going to benefit them and your whole family if you're someone with kids, I bet you're going to get a lot more support. Number 40. Focus. You have to know that focus is actually an advantage. So this market is noisy. There's lots of directions you could be pulled, but every time you get pulled in a new direction, your attention is split another way. So what I'd rather see you do is become an expert at one sport rather than being average at 3 or 4 sports. And you can also just align your investing and where you're putting your resources with your actual expertise. For example, if you know baseball and basketball better than football and hockey, then put your money into baseball and basketball cards. It seems obvious, but so many folks spread themselves so thin just thinking that they have to do everything that they actually end up hurting themselves in the long run. So remember, focus is an advantage. Number 41, get feedback from trusted peers. So this market can be pretty tough, and it's pretty lonely if you don't have other people in your life that do cards. So I strongly recommend you find yourself a support system of some kind so you can get feedback on your ideas, so you can get a second opinion on a deal that you're working on, so you can get a second set of eyes on a card that you can't tell on the condition. And one of the biggest advantages you can give yourself in this market is to just follow and replicate what other successful people have done before you. Everything that you're thinking about trying has already been tried by someone else before, and it either worked or it didn't. But instead of doing trial and error and potentially costing yourself a bunch of money, why not just follow in the footsteps of those that have come before you? You'll probably be able to go significantly faster. Now, you can absolutely find your own support system if you like, but if you're trying to find something like this is exactly why I built my card investing community, Ignite. It's a private community where our members ask questions, share deals, share wins, share losses and learnings, and help each other win. I'm also an active part of the community, so if you want feedback directly from me, this is how you can get some access. And if that sounds at all interesting, I'll leave a link in the description with details. But you can find your own version of this too, and I highly recommend you find yourself some kind of support system so that you're not going it alone. You're just going to move so much faster. Number 42, how strongly do you invest in a player? So it's okay to go super heavy on a player if you're confident that you're right, but just know that even the can't miss players absolutely can miss, and they do miss sometimes. So if you have all your eggs in one basket, that can put you in a tough spot if your player gets injured or underperforms. So diversifying where you're putting your money often is a good way to protect against the unexpected. And finally, number 43, learn the repeatable strategies and focus your efforts there. There are lots of ways to win in this market, guys, and part of the fun of this is we all get to pick our own journey. but I can tell you from experience that some strategies are far more consistent than others, and some strategies are far easier than others. Why not focus on the ones that are actually repeatable? You're going to set yourself up for far more success. The people who go farthest with cards focus on strategies they can consistently repeat over time. All right, that wraps up the list. Now, if this video has been valuable and you want more sports card talk and strategy, don't forget to subscribe. I post this kind of stuff all the time, but otherwise we'll see you on the next video.